All right, boys and girls. So I'm back again. We're into a good chapter, so I couldn't quite resist not doing the second part tonight. It's chapter 33, Nova Zembla. So they finally reached that little place, I'm assuming, from the title of the chapter, or they're close. I just saw that there was a lot going on in this chapter. So I said, what do you notice? You could use your notice and note strategies here. You might want to look at the character relationships and how they're changing or expanding. I noticed the little exchange between Jin Lo and Janie in the last chapter, and I can see like a mutual respect and friendship, which is kind of cool. So what do you notice? You could focus on that. You could focus on the decisions that are being made. So many things. So I'm leaving it up to you, the listener, to decide what you notice and what you want to think about. Here we go. The next morning, we crossed an invisible line, after which the air didn't just have the nip of the Arctic in it. The Arctic had seized us in its icy teeth and wouldn't let go. Even in our furs and woolen clothes, it was impossible to be on the deck of the boat without ducking our faces and hunching our shoulders against the freezing wind. If I breathed too deeply, I felt as if icicles were stabbing me in the lungs. Actual icicles formed on my eyelashes when my eyes watered, and if I took off my gloves, within seconds my fingers became too cold to function. The cook kept hot coffee and hot cocoa on the stove and passed it around in mugs. The men coddled the engines as if they were unpredictable toddlers who might erupt in tantrums at any minute or simply shut down, refusing to do anything their minders wanted. Never thought to compare an engine to a toddler, but it makes for a very good description. I might jot that down in my notes just to remember for next time how to take an inanimate object and add human characteristics to it, kind of personify it to get a sense of what it's doing. So cool. The mate with the sextant tried to take his sun sightings, but the sky was too cloudy at noon for him to take a reading. He frowned over his calculations. We're close to Soviet waters, he said. I just don't know how close. We may have crossed over. Not even an hour later, a lookout shouted, "A patrol vessel, sir!" Captain Norberg took a pair of binoculars from the lookout and peered at the horizon. The apothecary stood beside him. I could see the vessel too. It was on the horizon, but it was making a direct line for us. "It's Soviet," the captain said without putting down the binoculars. "However you're going, I need you off the boat now. The children also. There's no place a boarding party won't find them." So we hurried to the apothecary's cabin, where Jin Lo was already a swift-looking bird with fierce eyes and a cap of dark feathers. She must have gone below to take the avian elixir the moment the patrol boat was spotted. "A falcon," Count Billy said. "How terribly exciting." "It's appalling that you've never done this before," the apothecary said. "I do hope you won't be a flightless penguin." "Oh dear, is that possible?" Count Billy said. "I'd hate to be stuck here. I do want to see Andreas Sakharov." "And you want to help us stop Sakharov's bomb," the apothecary reminded him. "This is not a fan club." "Of course I want to stop it," the count said, hurt. Then he took up the bottle of elixir and drank, making a noise of surprise. His shining face and plump body began to shrink and shift. 30 seconds later, he was a large gray bird with a rounded bill and an enormous wingspan, like the albatross we had seen soaring in the wind off the stern. It was exactly the bird he would have wanted to become, and when he stretched his wings with delight, he smacked the falcon in the face with his wing tips. Jin Lo gave him a savage look. The albatross instantly drew in his wings and ducked his gray head in apology. "Yeah, don't upset Jin Lo." The apothecary handed me another vial. "Janie," he said, "please give this to Shishkin." "Is he coming with us?" "We can't very well leave him here." "I bet he becomes a stool pigeon," Benjamin said. I ran to Shishkin's cabin. He was still tied up, but the bonds would be too big for whatever kind of bird he became. so I didn't bother to untie him. "A Soviet patrol is coming," I said. "We can't let them catch you. You have to take this." Shishkin frowned at the vial. "What is it?" "There's no time to explain, but I've taken it and it's fine, I promise." I helped him drink and waited for the slow, fascinating transformation, but instead there was a small explosion in the cabin. I flinched and covered my eyes. When I looked back, Shishkin wasn't on his bunk. The knots that had held him were empty. I looked around the cabin for a bird, wondering if Shishkin had become something Russian, and what a Russian bird might be, but I couldn't find him. Then I saw it on the bed cover, a tiny pile of salt. I scooped every grain carefully back into the vial, pressed the rubber cap on tight, and ran back to the apothecary's cabin. "It's Lot's wife," I said. "I thought it was the avian elixir." "Shishkin would never have agreed to become salt," the apothecary said. "He was packing things in the cabin away, and we can't have the Soviets find him. Put him in that small backpack, please." I picked up the little backpack, which was a miniature harness attached to a hard, cylindrical case wrapped in leather, and I slid the portable Mr. Shishkin inside. Can you imagine being in a little vial and riding around on a bird? That just seems very odd. Like, who thinks of these ideas? Apparently Maylie Malloy. Okay. The backpack would fit a large bird and had tiny buckles. "Where'd you get this?" I asked. I adapted it from a design by a German apothecary. He shoved his medical bag into the bottom of a sea chest and covered it with blankets. He used to send medical prescriptions by carrier pigeon. "Will you put the rest of those vials in?" Each of the vials on the bunk fit in the palm of my hand, and I slid them one by one into the little backpack alongside Mr. Shishkin's vial. One contained something golden, the color of Jinlo's shimmering net. One was full of clear liquid, which I knew was the quintessence. I could smell its sweetness even through the seal. One was so cold it burned my fingers, and I had to pick it up with my sleeve. I wondered if it helped Count Willy freeze time. The fifth was an amber color, and I didn't recognize it. "That's an emergency supply of avian elixir," the apothecary said, "in case it wears off inconveniently early." I was going to ask him how we were going to get the elixir out of the backpack and drink it before plunging to an icy death, but Benjamin said, "The pharmacopoeia! Where do we put it?" I didn't have time to think. "With Captain Norberg's logbooks," I said, "like the chemistry lab." Benjamin ran out of the cabin with the book. The apothecary looked round the cabin to be sure everything looked ordinary and unsuspicious, then turned to me. "You'll be the smallest bird, Janie," he said. "The bomb will be in a wooden shed on the southern tip of Nova Zembla. The shed has been there for years, and therefore looks harmless to spy planes. We will need to discover how the bomb is triggered and how much time we will have until it goes off. If you can find a way to get into the shed, I may ask you to do so. I hate to keep making use of you, and I know Benjamin will object to putting you in danger again, but you will be the only one small enough to get inside." "I'll do it," I said. "I want to help." "Thank you." He handed me the little backpack. "You'll fit me with this," he said. Then he drank from the bottle of elixir. After a moment, he shrank and shifted until he was a snowy white barn owl with a heart-shaped face and piercing black eyes. In my nervousness about fitting the harness, I pinched one of his wings and he pecked at my hand. "Ow!" I said. "I didn't mean it." The owl's face looked sorry, and I realized pecking had been a reflex. When Benjamin came back, he looked startled for a moment by the snowy owl, but then recognized it as his father. "Captain Norberg says he'll stay near Nova Zembla until sundown in case he can pick us up. Then he'll wait in Kirkenes in Norway, just this side of the Russian border." The owl nodded and pushed the bottle of elixir towards him with his beak. Benjamin and I drank the rest of the elixir and became once again a skylark and a robin. Benjamin had thought to prop open the doors to the cabin and to the deck, and the 5 of us flew out and off the bow just as the Soviet boarding party came alongside. A few of the Anakin crewmen stared up at us with mouths dropped open until their friends elbowed them. Then they fixed their eyes stonily on the patrol as if nothing extraordinary had happened. They were just some innocent Norwegians who had wandered mistakenly into Russian waters out on a cloudy day. The air was bracing in my feathers, although it didn't feel as cold as when I was human, and the sky was overcast. I was smaller than the other birds, and it was difficult to keep up. Gusts of winds knocked us off course until Benjamin, flying a little higher, zipped ahead. We rose to his altitude and found a wind moving steadily north, and rode it until we came upon a great gray ship idling in the water, with gun turrets and a monstrous gray helicopter crouched on its stern. Count Willy had said that the Soviets would station a destroyer off Nova Zembla as an observation post for the test, and I guess this was the destroyer, which meant we were close to the island. We could see farther as birds than as people, and soon came upon Nova Zembla. It was more desolate than any place I'd ever seen before, frozen, treeless, and windblown. I couldn't believe anyone lived there. The archipelago had open waters along its long northern sides, but it was almost completely connected to mainland Russia by ice on the south and east. There was a landing strip at the southernmost tip of the island. Farther north, there seemed to be tiny houses spread out in little clumps. I guess they belonged to the Samoyeds. Near the landing strip of the nondescript wooden shed the apothecary had described as the secret housing for the bomb the Soviets had chosen well. It looked like nothing important would ever happen there. As we flew lower, we saw a sentry standing under the eaves of the little shed. He was wearing a white coat and a white cap as snow camouflage and seemed to be the only guard. Beside the shed was a mound in the snow, which revealed itself to be a sort of bunker. As we grew closer, probably for the sentry to sleep in, with a door dug out into the ground. When the guard was looking the other way, we landed behind the bunker, but I hadn't mastered stopping yet, and I bowled into Jinlo. She stepped disdainfully away on her sharp talons as I rolled through the snow. I could tell she considered all of us hopeless amateurs. I really liked Jinlo. We heard the sound of helicopter rotators chopping through the air, and the sinister gray machine appeared. It hovered near the bomb shed like a giant angry insect. The sentry clutched his white cap tightly to his head against the rotor's churning wind. Then the helicopter settled down, blowing snow into the cold air. 2 Soviet officers climbed out, one wearing a pilot's helmet and goggles, followed by 2 men in civilian clothes. One of the civilians was tall and elegant, even in heavy winter clothes, and I recognized him with a start. It was Danby, and with him was the German with the scar. The 5th and last man was young and thin in a long, nubbly fur coat and a gray wool hat. He had restless, distracted manner and longish hair sticking out from the hat. From the albatross's excitement beside me, I guessed this was Andrei Sarkov, the Russian genius Count Willy had wanted to see. In his gloved hands, the young physicist held a small metal box. The helicopter pilot had brought a thermos of something, and the sentry sat down happily on a 3-legged stool and turned his attention to it. The older military officer, whose face was tanned and tightened like the leather on an old pair of boots, unlocked the door to the shed with several different keys and a combination lock, and the men from the helicopter all went into the shed and closed the door behind them. I looked to the owl, and he nodded his snowy head. This was my moment to try to find out how much time we had. I flew around the shed looking for a way in, and Benjamin followed me. Luckily, the sentry was too preoccupied with his soup to notice us fluttering by. Finally, I found a narrow gap between the wall and the roof and squeezed my body through with some difficulty, finding a spot to rest in the eaves. Benjamin's skylark body was too big to get through, but I could see him perched outside. I was glad he was there. I couldn't see well inside the shed. It was dim, and one of the officers held a flashlight. On the floor in the center of the room was a long, horizontal cylinder with a coffin-like box laying alongside it. The box was about 8 feet long and dull and gray. I had expected it to have a round nose and tail fins, like the bombs we had dropped on Japan, but they weren't dropping this one from a plane. It didn't even look to be mobile. It made no noise and had no markings, but it had an ominous, deadly aura. I didn't like being in the close space with it. Zarkov placed his small metal box at one end of the bomb. The young helicopter pilot opened a toolbox for him reverently, as if assisting a famous surgeon. Zarkov chose a wrench. Danby walked around the bomb looking it over. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's the design I provided?" I could tell he was looking for praise, and he seemed as pathetic as someone in one of his Latin classes bragging about having done extra credit. Zarkov said something in rapid Russian under his breath. "Don't call me a traitor," Danby complained. "I believe you fit the very definition of a traitor," Zarkov said, attaching a fitting on the little metal box to the bomb. "And if you understand Russian, why must we use English?" "I'm a little rusty," Danby said. "I understand more than I speak." "Somehow I doubt that." "Please, comrade," the senior officer said. "We have important work here." Zarkov tightened a small bolt, then straightened and stood. "The design is this," he said, with clear contempt for the traitor who wasn't a physicist and didn't speak Russian. "In the atomic bomb, we split the atom. This is called fission. In this new bomb, the hydrogen bomb, we also split the atom, and use the energy produced to combine the nuclei of two atoms. This is called fusion. Then we use the energy released to make a second fission reaction, which will be 20 times the size of the explosion that destroyed Hiroshima. So yes, my idea is similar to what the Americans have given to the English military, but it is not the design you stole from them, which was flawed. At any rate, in ways I don't believe you understood. It was not necessary for you to be here, as I have said. The Americans and I have come to similar conclusions. This is because there is only so much you can do with an atom. You can split, you can combine, or you can leave it alone." He handed the wrench back to the helicopter pilot. Wow. What a put down. I think this is another place where you could generalize and think again about how much of this science that they just fed to us is accurate based on what atoms can and can't do. That would be something I would look up because I'd be curious. Or did the author just completely make it up? Because they can do that, right? It's fiction. I tried to sort out what Zarkov had said and realized that if this bomb was so powerful, it might overpower the apothecary's antidotes. I was about to squeeze outside to warn him when I heard the Scar's gravelly voice as if observing something about the weather. "Say, there is a bird." I felt a concussive blow of air and the room went dark. I was trapped inside some kind of tight, musty space, and I couldn't move my wings. A crack of light appeared and I saw a scarred human face peering in. I was inside the Scar's wool cap. "It's the American robin," he said. "Are you sure?" Danby asked. "We should not have animals in here," the Russian officer said. "I'll make a note." "This is not the point," the Scar said. "The bird is not native here. It is a spy." There was a pause of amazement at this bizarre claim. The senior officer said, "It has a camera?" "It's human," Danby said. It's a human who became a bird." The senior officer cleared his throat and spoke carefully, as if talking to dangerously crazy people. "The trigger mechanism is installed," he said. "We have 20 minutes. We must return to the ship." "Wait," Danby said. "We should search the island for other birds. They may be trying to stop the test." "We will go now," the senior officer said. The scar carried me out of the shed inside the hat. I didn't know if Benjamin had heard anything, and I had no way of telling him that the bomb might be too powerful for Jinlo's net. Then the rotors of the helicopter started up, and I knew that even my tiny robin's scream would be drowned out. I'd never been in a helicopter before, and riding blind inside a not very clean wool cap on the lap of a sassy murderer when you have information that your friends might desperately need is not the way I'd recommend trying it. The hat smelled of sweat, and the noisy, rickety helicopter swung sickeningly through the air. Finally, we landed on what had to be the deck of the destroyer. "We need a box or a cage," Mr. Danby's voice said. A hand grabbed me around the chest and pulled me out of the hat. Light flooded my eyes, and I looked around frantically. The ship was huge, nothing like the bathtub toy it had seemed from the air. But almost no one was on deck. I tried to wriggle free and stabbed at the scar's hand with my beak, but he only squeezed me harder, and I gasped. I thought he would crush my tiny bones. The young pilot appeared and thrust a toolbox into Danby's hands. "We go below deck, below water level now," he said. He pointed toward Nova Zembla. "Bomb, yes, much radiacity." "Yes, I'm aware of that," Danby snapped. The boy hurried away, and Danby opened the metal toolbox, which was the size of a loaf of bread and empty. They were going to put me in it? If I became human while inside it, I would be crushed as my bones grew. I would die painfully. I was sure, half bird, half human, too big for my prison. I shut my eyes and tried hard to imagine becoming human now. My heartbeat slowing, my wings becoming arms. Nothing happened, and the scar put me in the box. He seemed to be trying to figure out how to close the lid with his hand still in it, or to get his hand out without letting me go. I screeched in protest, and then it began. I felt my heart slow, and my bones got heavier, and my skull thicken, and my feathers retract, and then I tumbled to the deck in my pea coat and boots. The toolbox clattered beside me, and the scar was so surprised that he lost his hat, which blew across the deck of the destroyer. He ran after and snatched it from the air. I stood up, feeling awkward in my human limbs. "I knew it!" Danby said, grabbing me by the shoulders. "Where's the apothecary? Is he on Nova Zembla?" "He didn't make it," I lied. "He fell into the sea." Danby searched my eyes to see if I was telling the truth. "I'm the only one who got to the island," I said. "I couldn't save them." A tear rolled down my cheek, for I really did feel hopeless, and I let it stay on my face. I didn't know what to do except try to buy the apothecary time. Then a loud alarm went off on the destroyer, and a Russian voice over a loudspeaker issued a command. I wondered if the ship was shielded in some way against the radiation, or whether the water alone would protect us down below. The scar said, "We leave her on deck." Fear seized me. "You can't! I'll be poisoned and die." "Then that will be one problem solved," the scar said. Danby smiled and let go of my shoulder. "That's true," he said. "I envy you for seeing what it really looks like, Janie. We have cameras, of course. But film is never the same. It should be very beautiful so close." "Why are you doing this, Mr. Danby?" I asked. It can't be because you read Anna Karenina when you were 15. Danby seemed surprised for a moment. Then I knew about his Tolstoy conversation. But then he considered the question. "What better reason could there be?" he said. "I want the nation that produced such a book to survive, and not to be annihilated by your naive and vicious American government." "But a person produced that book," I said, "not a nation. I caught myself using the present tense. That was the great thing about the apothecary. He wasn't working for a country. He was working to save people everywhere." "As am I," Danby said. "A Soviet nuclear force is the only way to keep the Americans in check and ensure that their weapons will never be used. The U.S. needs a deterrent. I'm sure your parents would agree. Now, I really must go below. Don't leave me out here, I said. The Latin words on his chalkboard came into my head. Disimpru recessi. We are deceived by the appearances of right. Remember, you think you're right, but this is wrong. Danby smiled at me. You really were such a promising student, Miss Scott. I wish you all luck. He followed the scar toward the last open door to go below. I thought about running after them and trying to fight my way down, but I knew I would never be strong enough. I turned to the rail of the ship. I'd been acting as if I believed the bomb would go off because the apothecary wasn't around to stop it. But now I needed to believe that it wouldn't. She's a really good actress. I had to believe that the apothecary was strong enough to stop something 20 times more powerful than he expected. I was alone on the gray deck of the destroyer in the vast silver sea, and I wanted to be brave. Snow had started to fall. I stood a little straighter and tried to have some of Benjamin's fire in my eyes. Then I looked toward Nova Zembla and waited. Can you imagine being left out on the top of the destroyer to die? That seems very, very cruel. All right, well, we will pick up on chapter 34 next time. It's called The Bomb. And I know that expression has been taken over recently as something more positive, but I don't think that's what Maile Meloy meant. Catch you next time.
Bye.